We were 7. 6 guys and Jane, our fearless, stubborn Jane. We were best friends, a group that had been through everything together. This was supposed to be just another adventure, another memory to laugh about later. But by the end, 3 of us were gone. The rest of us came back different, hollow. Some nights, when I close my eyes, I swear I hear them, calling from the fog, begging us to come back. We've been planning this trip for months. A 2-day fishing trip, our chance to catch something no one else had, the Arctic kingfish. Rare, almost mythical, it was a prize no fisherman could resist. For us, it was more than just a fish. It was a challenge, a way to prove we could take on the impossible. They weren't very close to me, but I knew them all so well. Mark, the leader and the one who always knew how to push them toward new adventures. Tom, the risk-taker with a contagious energy that could turn anything into an adventure. Chris, practical and level-headed, the one who kept things grounded. Dan, quiet but sharp, the one who saw things others missed. Sam, the skeptic who always questioned everything. Jane, the fearless one, whose determination could outmatch them all. Me, the observer, the one who thought they'd seen everything, until this trip. The plan was simple. Take a shortcut through the Arctic Circle, reach the fishing grounds, and come back with a story no one could top. But the moment we set course for that uncharted route, everything started to go wrong. Before we even left, there were warnings. An old man at the dock saw us loading up and approached. "You're heading north?" he asked. His voice was steady, but his eyes held something, a fear he couldn't hide. "Turn back. That part of the ocean isn't for people like you." We laughed, thinking it was just superstition. We brushed it off as nerves, the kind you get before any big trip. But looking back, I wonder if the ocean was warning us, giving us one last chance to turn around. The first few hours were perfect. Clear skies, calm waters, the smell of the sea. It felt like freedom. Jane was at the radar, Tom and Mark were casting their lines, and the rest of us were joking about who'd catch the first fish. We felt untouchable, like nothing could ruin this trip. It started around midday. The fog came in fast, like a curtain dropping on a stage. 1 minute, we could see the horizon. The next, it was gone. Jane checked the radar, but it was blank. Nothing but an empty screen. It wasn't just the fog, it was the way it felt. Like we weren't supposed to be there, like we'd crossed a line we didn't even know existed. We pressed on, convincing ourselves it was just weather. But the further we went, the stranger things became. The horizon disappeared completely. No sky, no water, just endless gray. Time felt off. Hours passed, but it felt like days. Then Jane saw something huge and jagged looming in the mist. It didn't look like a rock or a wave. "It's not moving," she said, her voice trembling. But when we turned to look, it was gone. We sailed into what I can only describe as a dead zone. The water glowed faintly, and towering shapes loomed in the fog. They weren't rocks or icebergs. They were wrong, twisted. They sounded like people, but not quite. Like something was trying to mimic us and failing. Tom, curious and fearless, ventures to the edge to get a closer look. That's when it happens. A shadow shot out from the water. Fast, impossible to track. It grabbed Tom and yanked him into the fog. His scream cut off so abruptly, it left a void in the air. Panic took over. We tried to turn the boat around, but the wheel wouldn't budge. It was like the boat was moving on its own, dragging us deeper into the fog. Then Sarah is taken. She was standing near the railing, staring into the water, when something pulled her under. It didn't make a sound, just ripples, and she was gone. By the time Dan's voice echoed from the mist, we knew better than to believe it. "Help me," he called, over and over. But it wasn't him. It couldn't be. And yet, Chris couldn't stay below deck. "What if it is him?" he said, tears streaming down his face. Chris goes to check. The rest of them hear a scream, then silence. Chris is gone. It was over. The boat was taking on water fast, and we had nowhere to run. The walls groaned as the sea claimed it piece by piece, and we clung to whatever we could, waiting for the end. Jane and I held onto each other, whispering apologies for everything we'd said and done. We weren't praying. None of us had faith left. We just waited. The sounds outside the boat grew louder, more inhuman. Scratching, wailing, pounding. It was like the ocean itself was alive, trying to tear us apart. But the strangest part was the light. It came from below, a faint, glowing green that illuminated the water flooding in. It wasn't natural. It wasn't even beautiful. It was wrong. As the boat finally sinks, we were pulled under. The last thing I remember was the cold, the kind of cold that doesn't just numb you. It feels like it's pulling your soul out. And then, I woke up. At first, I thought I was dead, that this was the afterlife. But when I opened my eyes, I was back on the dock. The sun was rising, the water was calm, and everything was normal. Except, 3 of us were missing. Tom, Sarah, and Chris. They weren't there. It was like they never had been. Their gear was gone, their voices erased from the air. The rest of us, Jane, Mark, Dan, and I, just stood there, stunned. No one said a word. It was too much to process. The group checks the time and realizes something chilling. It was the same day. The same time we had left the dock for the trip. Everything we experienced, those endless hours, the terror, the screams, it all happened in the span of nothing. It was like time had reset, but the cost was 3 of our friends. We stumbled off the dock, our legs shaky like we just survived a storm, though the water was still. People greeted us like nothing had happened. "Good luck on the trip," one guy said, tipping his hat. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him we'd already gone, that we'd lost 3 of us. But I couldn't. My voice wouldn't come out. We all remembered everything. Every scream. Every shadow. Every second of that nightmare. But we couldn't explain it. We couldn't even process it. That night, I went home, locked my doors, and sat in the dark. I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying it all. And then I heard it. Faint at first, like it was coming from the depths of my memory. Tom's voice. The other survivors experienced the same haunting. Jane called me the next day. She hadn't slept either. "They're still out there," she said. "I can hear them." Mark was worse. He started drinking to drown out the voices, but nothing worked. Dan disappeared entirely. He left a note saying, "I'm going back." We never saw him again. I've spent every day since trying to piece it together, trying to understand what happened. But the more I think about it, the more I realize there's no understanding it. The ocean, it's not just water. It's something ancient, something alive. And it took them. It wanted them. If you ever find yourself in the fog, turn back. Don't look for answers. Don't listen to the voices. Don't make the same mistake we did. Sometimes, I wonder if we were supposed to come back. If the ocean made a mistake. I wonder if, one day, it'll come to collect the rest of us. And worst of all, I wonder if, when it does, I'll go willingly. Because every night, I still hear them. Calling my name. Begging me to return. If you felt that chilling presence while watching, don't face the next one alone. Subscribe now, the next story might be watching you already.